Göbekli Tepe is great and deserves all the attention it gets, but does it have the right kind of attention? There is another site in southeast Turkey that is probably going to turn out to be far more important than its more well-known contemporary. Let's talk about Boncuklu Tarla. I think it's fair to say, Rupert, that since we've made the commitment to make a series of films called Göbekli Tepe to Stonehenge, that our focus has been far more on the Middle East and the Fertile Crescent. And the more we look, the more complex and nuanced the whole development of farming culture in Mesopotamia seems to become. And the more we look, the more the idea of Göbekli Tepe being the ground zero of civilization becomes less and less tenable. In fact, it becomes downright misleading. What do you think?
I think that's a good way of putting it. It is misleading. And in actual fact, it's quite bizarre, really, that for the length of time that we've been hearing about Göbekli Tepe as almost ground zero. And, the oldest sophisticated settlement, if you like. But it turns out that there's actually quite a few dating back to this sort of length of time. Talking, 10, 11,000 years and more. And here we are at Boncuklu Tarla talking about something that's almost 13,000 years old. It's remarkable how far back this goes.
Yeah. And I think the important thing, if I'm reading this right about Boncuklu Tarla, is not how far back it goes, but the breadth of time that it was occupied. And so it's able to, when the excavations are complete, it'll be able to tell a far broader story about that time. I mean, it spans the time of the Younger Dryas.
Yes, which is so the settlement as a whole was we can't say for certain that it was permanently inhabited for this length of time, but certainly it was inhabited for 4,000 years, more or less, before it was abandoned about 8,000 years ago. It's just staggering, really.
So Boncuklu Tarla discovered it's quite away from Göbekli Tepe. But just over 300 kilometers away to the east in Mardin province. Discovered first in 2008 during prospective digging for the the Ilslu Dam.
Well done.
But serious excavations have been undertaken since 2012. And I think the main archaeologist responsible at the moment, I don't know if he was involved when back in 2012, was Dr. Ergül Kodaş of the University of Mardin. So the little astonishing thing is the excavations have been going on for quite some time. The last I read was that they've only done about 5% of what they think was under the soil, under this ground.
The whole site extends. It's about 3 hectares in size, and yes, they've excavated 5% of it. I mean, that's so. Lord knows what else they're going to find under there. There's. They are sophisticated architectural structures. I mean, we should probably... do you know what? Let's mention, just to get it out of the way, Boncuklu Tarla. Well, it means the field of beads. Yeah. They've found in their excavations, they found about 100,000 beads here. And some of them are carved into the shapes of animals, as even carvings of scorpions, for example.
Also, some of the pendants are,
what else? There's extensive use of copper at the site. In fact, the archaeologist was saying they were surprised at the extensive use of copper at the time. I made a note somewhere that that over all the rest of the sites in Anatolia, they found a few hundred copper items, but here they found, what was it, 2,000?
2,000, yeah.
It's just, and when you think of the age of the site, that's what makes all these details that much more surprising.
With respect to the copper, it's important to say we're not talking about copper tools here. They are so far anyway, the only copper items that have been unearthed are copper ornaments, worked into shapes. Scorpions is seems to be the top motif.
Yes.
So far. So, good going.
But also culturally, that they found earrings and lip rings as well. So again, this is a practice that might go back a lot further than we would previously have imagined. It's just more detail.
And we're talking the kind of earring that needs piercing, the kind of lip ring that needs piercing. So we're getting much more colourful images out of here than, to my knowledge, that ever have seemed to come out of Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing. That out of this tiny area of in what will be the entire excavation, the entire settlement, 5%, we're told that all this this material culture is coming out, which dwarfs what's been coming out of Göbekli Tepe, or what's been focused on at Göbekli Tepe, should I say. I mean, I'm quite open to be corrected about that, and maybe, Lee Clare at Göbekli Tepe, will have a different story to tell. But I think in the public image, certainly, the focus of Göbekli Tepe has been on the structures, it has been on the T-pillars, on the central building, the special buildings. Here, we're actually getting close to people. Like I said, we've got a much more colourful image of people, because those beads, I mean, I hope when we go to Turkey, we'll get to the Mardin Museum, where so many of these artefacts are kept. And some of the videos I've seen where the beads have been assembled, in as neck ornaments and all the rest of it, they're really quite beautiful and elaborate.
And some of them highly polished as well.
True.
It's intricately worked. So more surprises. I think building-wise, we tend to, when we look at Göbekli Tepe, for example, and so there's the similarity of architectural structure that we can see here as well. But fascinating here is that you have these communal buildings, they call them communal buildings, that they were sunk into the ground. So you still have these stelae, the upright pillars, but they're sunk into the ground, so that it's almost a subterranean building that you access through the roof. And the archaeologists say that the residential buildings where people were actually living were on the surface. So you had these surface-dwelling houses, but these subterranean communal buildings. That's interesting. You have to wonder what went on. And
fascinated. It's supposed to be the first window, which is interesting because, as you say, it seems to have been a roof skylight that provided exit and entrance. The exit and entrance was through the roof, nothing, no doors or no side windows or something like that. So although we're describing, or they have been described as public places, as communal places, in reality, they must have been quite dark and quite, enclosed spaces. Not really that much room for
it's an interesting,
that many people to gather.
Yeah, it's an interesting distinction to make, isn't it? Because they make the differentiation because you can see when there's signs of domestication. So they know in the houses there's signs of people living there, whether it's a hearth that might be outside or what have you. There's something about them that shows that people live there. Whereas these communal buildings, there's no signs of the domesticity. So that doesn't really tell you that when they say it's a communal building or a public building, it could be that that's public use in whatever way. It doesn't necessarily mean that people were spending time inside them.
Before we go too much deeper, I think, first of all, a little bit of a word from our sponsors. And our sponsors are, of course, our Patreon supporters. How many are there of them?
283 at this particular moment in time.
As of this moment. But the other fascinating statistic about our Patreon page is, it's been going for a while now. There are well over 400 items of exclusive material on there, unseen by anybody else. So if you're into this kind of stuff, there's loads more on our Patreon page available to folk for $5 a month. You can join our wonderful community, who are wonderful. They're so supportive and a good bunch. Have a look in the description below. And also don't forget to like and subscribe. It all helps the wheels turn round a bit fast. It makes the boat go faster, should we put it that way? Yeah.
It does. Well said, yes.
Anyway, on with the show. What I was going to say was you kicked off, I sort of set the question, and you kicked off saying how many other sites, beside Boncuklu Tarla that are in the area. And we just need to sort of say a few words about that. Have you got names on the tip of your tongue?
On the tip of my tongue. Well, there's the better known, apart from Göbekli Tepe, there's Karahan Tepe, of course, which was, there's quite a lot of excavation has been going on there for some years now. But we shouldn't ignore the other sites that fit around this same time period, going further south as well, like Jericho and Wadi Fainan in Jordan, which is again the same sort of age.
Well, I think that there's another very important place, Abu Huraira, which I think is probably just over the border. I hate to mention borders, actually, because it sort of gives an impression of a divide that would not have been there. So Abu Huraira would not have been that far away back in the day. And, of course, we're talking another site that predates Göbekli Tepe, but shows signs of the same kinds of stuff going on in terms of grain storage, silo storage of grain. So, the farming and agriculture well in full swing there, and the same kind of settlement things going on. And that's just in northern Syria, is it? Or is it Iraq? I can't remember now. I think it's northern Syria.
I don't remember, to be honest. No.
Yeah. But there's no end of other tepe sites as well to mention. I don't know if any trip off the tongue. Obviously, we know of Karan Tepe. Can't think for the moment. There's
well, we can snip this bit out, can't we?
It's okay. I'll tell you what. I've found something. I can knock off the top. There's Hamzan Tepe, Karan Tepe. I've said that. Sefer Tepe, Tashli Tepe, Nivalti Sori, Kilisik Tepe, and the list goes on.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So
I'll tell you something that I found really fascinating here. That something that's not unusual culturally is that the burials were beneath the houses. So people were buried where they had lived. Why put them anywhere else? There was no external cemetery, for example. People were buried in their own houses. And in a couple of instances, they found couples buried together, so people buried in an embrace. That's only in 2 graves that they found that, but even so, that's quite poignant, isn't it? What's the story behind that? And obviously, we'll never know. But certainly there was that, and then there was another grave they found that contained, I think it was 3 children in one grave.
Okay.
But then there was a practice of, after a period of time, they would uncover the burials and remove the skulls only, and take them to be placed somewhere else. So that's an interesting cultural
Yeah, and it's not just at Boncuklu Tarla. The evidence at Boncuklu Tarla is confirming evidence that goes back to other sites to around about 13,000 BCE, and continues actually the practice of interment, within the domestic setting. The retrieval of skulls, the sort of skull curation aspect as well, seems to have lasted right through to about 7,000 BCE. And I think that is one area where at Boncuklu Tarla that it's confirming the practice. It seems it's a bit sketchy. But think of that. It's another bit of colour. This was a practice that would have been going on, with the culture that was inhabiting Göbekli Tepe and the other Tepe sites in the area.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is just so much more full of colour and diversity, and the fact that we get sort of different spectrum, a different spectrum of what was going on from each site. They're broadly similar, but each site sort of brings a new perspective to life. It's quite astonishing and wonderfully complex. Is there anything else that...
I think one other thing that is certainly worth mentioning, bearing in mind the age of this site, is that they're pretty sure, the archaeologists are pretty sure, that they've actually revealed an 11,800-year-old sewage system. Now, that's, that's a significant level of sophistication to be building into structures. That impressed me, I have to say.
Yeah. And the question is, bearing in mind that only 5% or so of the site has been excavated so far, and has so far brought out such riches in terms of illumination of the culture and what people were interested in, how they were adorning themselves, etc., etc. Just how much more is going to come out of this particular excavation?
Well, just to put a silly number on that, 100,000 beads, and they've excavated 5%.
Yeah, and there are 30 houses.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the 7 communal buildings as well in the centre of this community. Do you know what I suspect goes on at a lot of these sites? And I think to a large degree the domestic attributes of aspects of all these sites tend to be sidelined when they're possibly some of the more important aspects. As far as day-to-day life is concerned, excavating and only excavating Westminster Abbey is not going to tell you much about, the daily lives of
that is so very true
of Londoners, is it? And one thing I do suspect is that these are, though we've got sort of village size that's indicated by the excavations so far, I suspect the community was actually pretty large. In order to support, in all these sites, in order to support the building of such a massive large communal buildings or special buildings that we've seen, that the community would extend beyond what we see built. I suspect, in good medieval castle fashion, that the castle would extend far beyond the castle walls, or the community that supports the castle would extend way beyond the castle walls. So, that is speculation, because it's hardly likely that we're going to find evidence of, a tented or a, wooden pole or wooden buildings beyond the stone building. But I strongly suspect that may be the case in order to support the numbers, in order to have the numbers that support such building and such concentration in what must have been a hierarchy. I think, and that is another aspect in terms of all of these communities, all of these settlements, that they display that there must have been an organizational factor here that speaks to
well, when you
intent.
factor in as well that they've found evidence for textiles as well, which shouldn't be a surprise, but when you actually start thinking about what it takes to weave cloth. So you've got weaving of cloth, you've got the fashioning of beads and ornaments, some of which are quite sophisticated. All these things take time, and so you're talking about a people who actually have enough time on their hands to be doing a lot of these things. All right, they're not going to sit down in the evening and do half of the things that we take for granted now. They would have a lot of after dark time to fill. But nevertheless, there was so much. I think that there's even one of these stelae that has a carving on it. It has depictions of people wearing skirts and tunics.
Okay, I'm not sure about that. I think that was a general observation that was made about some other sites that support, the idea of wearing of garments, etc. I think that
was he talking about a? Okay, well, you can snip that out. I'll have to.
No,
go
it's
back
all right.
Into no, well, we can do. I'm just trying to think, because that was something that I just made a note of at the time, but I don't remember.
I think it was a general point that he made that yes, they have found materials at the site, but it doesn't tell us anything about, what in themselves. They don't tell us anything about what people are wearing. But he said that elsewhere, on some of the sites where there are carvings, we've seen depictions of people wearing, tunics and skirts. That's what he said. So there we are. So many, many talking points to come out of this, and I hope really begins to illuminate the diversity and the multifaceted aspect of excavations in the Levant and Mesopotamia, and how Göbekli Tepe rather narrows our focus. Fantastic though the site is, it does tend to narrow our focus and blind the sort of public consciousness about the breadth of and diversity of the other sites in the area that are providing far more information. I think that's about where I think we should end this little conversation, and hope that it's illuminated many factors that you weren't aware of before. Anything else you want to add to that, Rupert?
No, I think you're right. I think it just shows that the deeper the deeper they dig, the further back in time we find that these levels of sophistication were thriving. So I'm sure there's still many surprises to come out of this site anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure there are many elements that we'll have missed and omitted from our short breeze through these things and Boncuklu Tarla itself. But I hope you enjoyed that. Anyway, as I say, do have a look at our Patreon page. Hit the like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you all again very soon, I hope. All the best for now.
Cheerio.
Sweet.